Hello, beautiful people. This is Samson Williams. I'm president of the Crowdfunding Professional Association. And today we have Scott Harrigan with us today from Securitize. How are you doing today, Scott?
Hey, I'm doing good, Samson. Happy
Awesome.
to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Likewise, likewise. So I like just jumping right into it because I prefer not to do any prep so that we can just ask you those burning questions in 30 seconds or less. If someone is going to check out Securitize, tell us what is that one burning reason they need to know about Securitize. Go.
Well, yeah, sure. We're on the cutting edge of the digital asset space, right? And so we're here today with your organization and the combination of how Securitize can assist issuers that are interested in both crowdfunding, but in tandem with doing it in a digital asset environment. Securitize is definitely the company that they should be checking out.
Awesome. So you've set the stage. Now we're going to ask those really hard, tough technical questions. What does Securitize actually do, and how does it help with crowdfunding?
Yeah, so Securitize actually does a number of interesting things, right? But the way that I sort of try and break it down is into three key components, right? So Securitize offers something that we call Securitize ID. And what that is it's our own proprietary identity management platform. And Securitize ID is a very powerful KYC and AML tool that underpins everything else that Securitize offers. And so that's sort of step one in the offering. Step two is Securitize is a registered transfer agent with the SEC. And so for security tokens that we create and issue on our platform, we act as the registered transfer agent for those digital assets. And then finally, Securitize Markets, which is the entity that I'm the CEO of, is a registered broker-dealer. And we also operate an ATS, a digital ATS, which is super unique as well in the US.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So now I get sort of what you do. I'm gonna hit you with this hard question. I'm a founder. I've had a business for 3 to 5 years. How are you going to help me? I need some money. I need some cash. How is you going to help me with? I understand the KYC tool that's super cool. A transfer agent that's awesome. Security tokens. I've heard a lot of buzzwords, but I'm a founder. I need cash. How does Securitize help me get cash from my business?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? And I mean, we get these questions from issuers every day. Like I'm on telephone calls consistently, and I think you're right? I think that the founders want to understand the different pieces of this, right? It could be very intimidating, I think, to founders to go through this process. And I think at Securitize, we try and simplify that. And I think in a couple ways, Securitize is unique in that we can help founders through the entire process. And let me just explain what I mean by that, right? And so as a broker dealer, Securitize can work with issuers to raise capital. So we offer a primary issuance product that with issuers using some of the exemptions you're very familiar with, right? Whether it's a Reg CF or a Reg A plus, or even in some cases a Reg D exemption, we can assist issuers in setting up a capital raise. Once that issuer, right, goes through that process and is successful in terms of raising that capital, they then work with our team to issue the digital assets or the security tokens that represent the investment that they made into that capital raise. And then as transfer agent, we do all of the compliance related work. So in the event that there are holding periods, we build all of the compliance requirements into the smart contracts, and we do all the compliance related work to maintenance of those digital assets. And then finally, once those digital assets are available for trading, we can then offer that founder the ability to list those assets on our ATS so that the folks that had originally invested in those have access to liquidity for those assets. And I think that's really important, right? Because we're here talking about the concept of crowdfunding. And I think when you think about it in the past, right, I think that for folks who had participated in crowdfunding in general, the liquidity piece, I think, was always the piece that sort of might have put pause in some people's minds, right? And so I think that, participating in a Reg CF or a Reg A plus becomes so much more appealing when folks that are having any sort of type of life event that might require immediate liquidity know that there's a channel that they can turn to try and accomplish that if the need arises.
Mhm. I'm going to go sort of out of order on the sequence of questions, because you said that Securitize will help you issue your digital assets. So on one hand, we have founders who are called issuers when they're issuing a financial product to raise capital. And on the other hand, we have other FINRA licensed funding portals. Can those funding portals also use Securitize to issue their digital assets?
Well, anybody who's an issuer can use Securitize to issue digital assets, right? So Securitize, I think the key part in terms of trying to understand how this all works, and it's something that we try and help founders or issuers understand, is that the transfer agent role in all of this is very important, right? And so for anyone that wants to issue a digital security, Securitize takes that role of transfer agent. It's a very important role. It's the role that steps in front of all of the compliance related requirements around that security. And so the answer is, we can issue digital assets or digital securities for any issuer or entity. The key there is that as the transfer agent, we can guarantee that, any of the restrictions or holding requirements or anything else required upon issuance of those, are being looked after in the appropriate way as a transfer agent. And that's our primary role.
Mhm. So I'm going to take a step back, and Samson's Pen Company, we've got our deal together. We're incorporated out of Delaware. We're a solid C Corp. We've got our business plan. We have our pitch video. We've gotten a lawyer to help us fill out our Form C, because we're going to do a Reg CF. We've got that figured out. We come to Securitize. We have all our documentation in place. We've paid that probably $10,000 to $20,000 to get our documentation in place so that we can do a Reg CF. Now, when we come to Securitize, walk me through that process. What does that look like now that I'm trying to raise money for my pen company?
Yeah. I think, it's simpler than you think, right? I think the benefit that we have here at Securitize is that we've done this so many times that it's become a bit of a science for us in terms of onboarding a fundraising client, right? And so we would typically take, about an 8-week period. We would work with you, right, as the issuer, to get an understanding of exactly how you'd like to present the opportunity to your investors. I know you had mentioned that you have some videos and you have some documentation. We would build your investor experience, which is a customized investor experience. We would work with you on populating all of the information around your offering. And so there's no limitation in terms of videos or print. We can do whatever it is that you think will help best present your opportunity. And then we'll open your offering, right? We'll work with the investors to onboard through the tool that I had mentioned called Securitize ID. That will become, in essence, their license to begin using the platform. And that really is the process, right? And so what we would also be able to offer to you as the issuer is you will have a real-time perspective into how your project is progressing. We have real-time dashboards that you as the issuer can see so that you can understand who's participating in your offering. You can see sort of the demographics around their locations and where they're participating from, and all kinds of cool information. And track that through the end of the offering. And then once the offering is closed, we would then work with you to actually issue the tokens. And so we would work together to complete the issuance of the tokens into your investors' wallets. And then using their securitized IDs, they would be able to log on to our platform and see those assets sitting in their wallets. And then at one point, if they want to access our ATS to trade those assets, they would be able to do that as well. And so they would be able to list their assets for sale in the ATS. They would also be able to participate if other folks were listing assets for sale in the ATS and participate as buyers. And so once someone sort of authenticates themselves to our ecosystem through Securitize ID, they do not need to leave that ecosystem. So from the time that they log on to view your opportunity through the time that they might potentially want to use the ATS to trade it, it all remains within the Securitize platform, which, Samson, is really unique in this space, because what you'll find is for the experience that I just described, that in most cases, issuers would need to engage multiple parties to handle the roles that I just described. I think what we're excited about is we're able to offer issuers that end-to-end experience within the Securitize ecosystem.
So Scott, we have two questions from the audience. Number one is, what exemptions does Securitize allow to be listed other than Reg CF, Reg A plus, and Reg D?
Yeah, so right now we're limited to those exemptions, right? The way that we're thinking about the business is, as time goes on, we will continue to evolve our membership application with FINRA to consider other alternatives. We've had our business live since August. And so we're in very early stage as it relates to, sort of the launch of Securitize markets. Securitize actually launched the business in 2017 for the transfer agent and security token business. And so there's a bit more maturity on that side of the business. But on our broker dealer and ATS, we'll continue to evolve and consider other opportunities as time goes on. It's sort of in post-launch phase. And so I think, huge growth opportunities ahead, and we'll consider what makes most sense as time goes on.
Scott, I'm going to do a shameless plug for the Crowdfunding Professional Association, because since 2016, the crowdfunding industry has had 100% growth year over year. So I'm just going to do the last couple of years. So 2020, it was 214 million raised specifically in Reg CF. In 2019, it was 105 million. In 2018, it was like 54 million. This year, fast forward to 2021, Reg CF is 5 years old. It's now old enough to go to kindergarten. Reg CF is right on the cusp of about $565 million that it's going to raise in 2021. October through December is crowdfunding season. What that means is the most investments are made in the last quarter of the year. Why that is, we don't actually know, but the thought is people are just trying to situate their taxes doing gifts. I'm not going to give you a lump of coal. I'm going to give you some stock in a private business. So this year, the crowdfunding industry is going to be around right at $500 million. Next year, we anticipate it being at $1 billion. And this is just for Reg CF, not including Reg A plus or Reg D. The Reg A plus verticals are going to do about $2 billion in 2021 this year, primarily driven by interest in real estate. Why this is exciting is because we anticipate for the next, until 2026, we see where we will have 100% year over year growth until about 2026, when this hockey stick sort of plateaus off, and we'll get between $8 and $12 billion annually that comes into via Reg CF. We're not talking about Reg A plus, Reg D, just Reg CF. So we have some other questions about how many individual investors are there to date in Securitize. And I want to answer this question from Vincent, keeping in mind that the big regulation for raising the limit to $5 million, that just took effect in March of 2021. That's something the Crowdfunding Professional Association advocated for. So whatever your answer is, just remember next year it's going to probably quadruple. So Vincent, how many individual investors have there been in Securitize ID as of this year?
Yeah, it changes so quickly, but I think we're probably up to about 420,000 individual investors in Securitize ID, as we're recording this, which is really impressive when you think about the exponential growth, right? The fact that Securitize really launched in earnest in 2018, the fact that we've grown that rapidly in Securitize ID is really impressive. I think Securitize ID in itself, is a really useful tool. And I think the thing that I really should mention too is Securitize ID is now sort of a standalone product that other DeFi protocols are considering using as well, as regulatory starts to become more front and center. I think, and DeFi protocols are recognizing, the need for a tool like this. Securitize, I think, is sort of ready and waiting to be able to assist, those sort of companies in that journey as well. And so, yeah, we're really proud of the growth in Securitize ID. I think, really our goal right now is, how do we now take those investors that have come aboard Securitize ID and have them benefit as equally from what we're doing in securitized markets. And so, really the goal is to try and create a liquid platform, right, on securitized markets. And we're hopeful that we're able to sort of convince and provide assets that are interesting enough on our marketplace to sort of move a whole bunch of those investors into that environment.
So we got 3 questions. 2 of them are sort of related. Actually, all 3 are related. So the first question is, can Securitize be used in lieu of a Reg CF platform?
Yes, it can. We are approved as a Reg CF portal. So the answer to that is absolutely.
And for Brian, who asked that question, just remember, Securitize is also a broker dealer, so they can offer you a variety of services, enhancing services than just a Reg CF portal, than just a Reg CF funding portal can. So we have another 2 questions. First one is, what type of market liquidity can Securitize asset access?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's what sort of drives me every single day, right, is working on that problem, right? I think, in the marketplace, right, I think for a industry in the digital asset space that is sort of still growing but growing rapidly, I think liquidity in general has been a challenge, right? There have been a couple of venues that have been at this for a lot longer than we have. And so I think that, that's the problem I try to solve each day, right? We have a supply problem to solve and a demand problem to solve in order to make the liquidity puzzle work. But I think there's multiple ways to go at that, right? And so I think the one is the one we spoke about already, which is our existing investor base. And it's a large one. And I think that that's one benefit that we have. I think, though, that we also need to think about partnering with the right partners to be able to sort of do things like share order books, so that we can drive more effective liquidity, both domestically and internationally. And so I think there's ways to do it. I think it's a work in progress. I think a number of players in the space are trying to solve the problem. And I think that the benefit that we have is sort of back to what we talked about here in the beginning, which is Securitize has the unique ability of creating supply. And what I mean by that is, through these issuer engagements and these issuers that are interested in raising capital, it actually gives us the ability to create the digital asset supply. And so we can feed sort of the ATS with the supply that we create with our STO business. And so we're very optimistic that, you know, adoption is definitely starting to increase. We're starting to see lots of momentum in terms of issuers interested in issuing security tokens. And we think ultimately that plays into, you know, building the ATS and the liquidity on the ATS.
And I've got a bunch of questions more, and just a reminder, see if you new people have joined, we are recording this, so you'll be able to watch this later on the Crowdfunding Professionals website and of course Securitize website. So I do want to jump into the question, because you're talking about for Reg CF, you have an 8-week onboarding process where you help build the investor experience. You have real-time dashboards. That's just for Reg CF. We have a question from McCormick. This is probably leaning in the Reg A plus territory. What is the securitized percentage cost for setting up a $10 million raise for a ground up commercial real estate project?
Listen, I think I don't want to get into any specific pricing right on this call, because so much depends on the nature of each individual deal. I'd encourage them to reach out directly to us, and we'll be happy to look at the individual opportunity so that we can give a more effective idea in terms of the cost of doing that. I just want to circle back to the idea around the Reg CF, right? Is when I said 8 weeks, that's sort of on the long end, right? Depending on the complexity of the setup, in a lot of cases, Reg CF would fall short of that. And so I think, you know, sort of 8 weeks would be the standard across all, right, of the primary capital raise pieces, with CF being on the shorter end of that. So I just wanted to circle back on that one.
No, that's a completely valid point. And I just want to, anyone who's watching, just remember, it's sort of like preparing for a marathon. You may be able to go out tomorrow and run a marathon, but you might die at the end. And so that's not very successful. So if you're looking to raise funds, whether it's 1 million or 10 million, it is a process. You do need to plan. The more you plan and get your ducks in a row from an administrative perspective, the quote unquote easier it's going to be for you. Generally speaking, for the Crowdfunding Professional Association, we say that you should anticipate spending 10% of your raise up to the first $1 million, and then it scales down after that. So that's a general rule of thumb. Just remember, it's not free. You need to, I see David Duccini's here in the conversation. You need to convert your social capital into financial capital. And if you haven't built that social capital, that's where you're going to spend a lot of funds on marketing. That's separate from just getting your deal organized. And last but not least, right now there are about 63 FINRA licensed funding portals here in America. And I want to say there's probably 3,100 broker dealers. So you can definitely shop around to see which provider offers you the best services. I do want to go back to another question, and says from David, are securities listed on Securitize considered over the counter?
Yes. So I guess that's a pretty simple answer. Yeah, they are. You know, we now are listing 5 securities on Securitize markets, and so you know, there's a sort of limited group out there. Again, you know, having launched in September, I think we're super proud of the fact that, you know, we've been able to sort of get this much traction this soon. And, you know, we have some really interesting stuff coming up as well. And so we'll have, you know, some cool stuff happening over the next couple months or so. I think that will that will be really exciting for this group to hear about.
Nice. And so I do want to bring it up because we see some comments here. How are you executing your Reg CF deals? Is that through your broker dealer?
It is. So right now, you know, we are in the process of probably sometime in Q1, really going to make a really strong push for Reg CF deals. I think you had raised some amazing numbers earlier in the call around sort of the future of Reg CF. Our early interest at Securitize has really been mostly around Reg A plus deals. And I think, what have found interesting is, we have found that the Reg A pluses have a uniqueness in that it really sort of aligns strong consumer brands with their customers. And so it sort of, I think is unique in that, it aligns founders, with people who are fans of the product, fans of the service. And so our early interest, we've seen a lot of Reg A plus interest. And for us, it's a really great problem to help solve for founders. We've worked on a couple of very successful Reg A deals. In fact, we acted as the transfer agent for a really large Reg A deal for a company called Exodus. And Exodus raised, I think, 75 million from just over 6,000 investors that we onboarded through Securitize ID. And so, I think, as you said, we're really excited about the opportunity in the Reg CF space, but our early interest in work has had a lot of focus around the Reg A plus.
And so just for anyone watching this, or if you want to check up on anyone, rather as part of your due diligence process to figure out which platform or service provider you want to, you can visit FINRA, finra.org, crowdfunding portals we regulate to check out their Reg CF offerings, or rather the funding portals that FINRA regulates. And for broker dealers, you can go to brokercheck.finra.org /firm summary. And it will tell you which broker dealers that they regulate. Again, it's always good to do your KYC. I see that Mr. Duccini has dropped your link down there in the chat, your number 283256, in case you've ever looked at that.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I do want to circle back because I've avoided it to this point. Actually, I'm going to pin this blockchain conversation first and go back to some of the projections that we're looking at for the Reg CF market itself. So just a brief history lesson for those of you who are unfamiliar. The Jobs Act, Jumpstart Our Businesses and Startup, was signed in 2012, or rather was passed in 2012, signed into law in 2016. At the time, the limit for a raise was $1 million. Fast forward through the efforts of the Crowdfunding Professional Association, the limit now for crowdfunding for Reg CF is $5 million. Plus some clarity around blue sky laws, the fact that Twitter didn't exist in 1933, you can now use social media to speak publicly that you are raising money. A little clarity around tombstone rules, but not as much as we'd like. They did raise the amount that retail investors could invest a little bit, not as much as we'd like. But because now that the amount that businesses can raise, founders can raise, is now 5 million, we've seen an exponential increase in the amount of funds that have been committed via Reg CF. So again, in 2020, it was 214 million from the total industry. This year, we're somewhere north of $550 million for the year. We've also seen almost a doubling in the number of crowdfunding portals that have a FINRA license, plus a number of broker dealers who are saying, hey, we need this Pop Warner football type of form system. And Scott, this is why we're pretty confident in the growth of Reg CF, because for yourself, where in the past, you might not want to help someone raise 500, $1 million, $2 million. However, now you can see the benefit of, if this company, gets herself administratively in order, goes through your onboarding process successfully, raises their first $200,000, $500,000, it's awesome. When they come back in 12 months, 24 months, then they might be in a better position or need to raise a Reg A plus, or even up to $5 million. And I think we don't remind people of this enough. It's $5 million per 12-month period. So if you hit your cap this December of 2021, you could come back in January, 12 months later, in 2023. And so it's super important. And as the form system for startups. It just makes startups healthier because people understand what is required to raise money. And so the other benefit for the portals and broker dealers such as yourself, as more deals are closed, the investor acquisition cost goes down for the portals because more people are just familiar with the process. So that's my bit rant about that. I do want to take this question from Brian Korn. He says, what reforms to Reg CF could be helpful for capital raising? I don't know if that's for me or you, Scott, but I'm going to ask you first, Scott.
Yeah, I don't know. I might defer to you on that one.
Generally speaking, my feeling is if you can be a customer of a business, you should be able to invest equal amounts of the products you might buy. So if this pen costs $10,000, but I'm a retail investor and I'm limited to roughly $2,500 to invest, I should be able to invest as much as this product cost. That's one of the tweaking, changing our removal of the accredited investor. I think this is a misnomer. I think that nowadays people have enough resources to do due diligence, so that this idea of a sophisticated investor is a misnomer. So that's the first thing.
Yeah.
So let me see, Brian has asked this other question. So I basically answered his questions. David Duccini asked a question. I don't quite know what it is, so I'm going to pin that and ask you, David, if you could restate your question, it'd be super helpful. But Scott, I want to go back and go talk about, you mentioned DeFi protocols, you've talked about STOs, and we've avoided saying blockchain this whole time, which I love. So we're going to spend a little bit of time. Tell us about blockchain, where you see how does Securitize engage with the blockchain ecosystem and blockchain products?
Yeah, I mean, I think, just the idea of blockchain and the benefits that it brings, I think when you sort of marry that to the capital raising process, you have quite a powerful combination, right? And so, just sort of walking through the benefits of blockchain versus a traditional securities environment, I think is really important, right? And the first thing that we all should have or do have at top of mind is compliance, right? And when we talk about digital asset securities on the blockchain, from a compliance perspective, right, the greater the adoption of digital assets on the blockchain, I think the more efficient the compliance process becomes. When you think about the ability to build all of these rules and requirements into a smart contract that then resides on the blockchain, now you're taking what traditionally was a reactive process on the side of regulators and compliance, and you're proactively building this into the technology. And as time goes on, there'll be an incredible benefit to the entire ecosystem from that efficiency. I think the second thing that I think about when we talk about blockchain in this space is the impact that it has to the investment community themselves. And what I mean by that is that I think there's a feeling that we're starting to get that from issuers, that the idea of digital assets on the blockchain is opening up, a whole new group of investors to certain investments that before they might not have necessarily shown interest in. And so I think that, when you think about how, from a regulatory perspective, these things are now considered so much safer, right? That the risk that people used to feel back during ICOs and sort of that period of time is starting to wane, because I think investors are starting to understand that these digital assets that are on the blockchain are now regulated as intently as traditional assets, as traditional securities. And I think that's opening up a whole new group of investors to these opportunities. And then in terms of just efficiency and scalability, when you think about what the blockchain presents, right? Like as a transfer agent, I'll use a real example, right? Is I've worked at large traditional transfer agents in my past career. And, it was a very paper-based, labor-intensive environment. We've at Securitize eliminated paper completely in our transfer agent business. We don't use paper at all. The technology, the blockchain technology, and the digital asset protocol has given us the ability to create incredible amounts of efficiency. And that goes across all of the processes, right? Whether that's proxy processing or potentially paying dividends on these securities, or the KYC and AML processing. And so, I don't think we can minimize the impact that blockchain and digital assets has in this space. And I think that while adoption has been maybe slower than many had thought, I think we're starting to see an incredible amount of momentum. And so I'm really optimistic about, I know you're very optimistic about the growth in the CF space. As optimistic about the growth in the digital asset space and the use of blockchain in sort of capital raising.
No, I do love it. I work on some blockchain projects, which always start with removing paper, and everyone apparently works for Dunder Mifflin at that moment because they don't want to remove paper nor pen from the processes. But I do see the operational efficiencies that blockchain can bring. And just a note for any potential investors: one, this isn't investor advice, but two, always do your due diligence. Blockchain isn't hot sauce. You just can't sprinkle it on a business and boom, it magically improve that business or make that business profitable. So always remember to do your due diligence to make sure you're dealing with someone who's offering a good product or service that has that market fit that makes sense. Again, blockchain is not hot sauce. It won't magically just make, I'm trying not to curse. It won't magically make a bad and I do love the fact that you're really talking about on the operational side for Securitize as a business, some of the efficiencies of removing paper, number one, because that's in that big FinTech bucket, which I love a lot.
And then if I could kick in, right? And it's not only that, it's this versus traditional finance and what it does to change an investor's experience, right? So when you think about what Securitize does, right? The fact that we're maintaining these assets on the blockchain, when someone trades these assets on our ATS, unlike a traditional security settlement time period, we're seeing settlement almost instantly, right, on our platform as transfer agent. And so, there's a huge benefit to the investor as well. It's sort of such a unique, for someone like myself coming from traditional finance, for many years that was used to traditional settlement periods and working for broker dealers that operated within those infrastructures. This is so exciting for me to be able to see how we can, employ this technology to not only provide, the issuer with these incredible tools, but also their investors with an experience like they can't even see working in traditional financial markets.
Mm-hmm. So we do actually have a question from another, there's like 4 or 5 Brians on this call apparently. So as that instant settlement, it is a technological change, but it's also a cultural change. So I want to talk a little bit about that, answer Brian's question. His question is, how different is a deal like Exodus, where you are selling tokens, versus company equity from a transfer agent perspective, if that was what Exodus was? So I'm going to ask you that first question.
Yeah, so right now, Exodus it's not, we hope it will be, but right now it's not actually trading on Securitize Markets ATS. It's actually trading on another ATS. We have done some integration with other providers so that we can somewhat replicate that settlement experience. It's never as straight through as it is within the Securitize sort of standalone environment, but we have and we will consider integrating where it makes sense to try and try and bring that experience or the best trading experience to investors.
Mhm. So as you're bringing that best trading experience to investors, the second part of that question was, how do you get customers comfortable with verifying blockchain transactions?
Yeah, I mean, this is an ongoing challenge, right? I think that it's all about education, right? It's all about, having them understand mechanically how this stuff works. Listen, it took me a while to try and understand it myself. What I've come to find is sometimes the best way to explain it is that, sort of the things that are happening in the blockchain world, right, are somewhat underpinned by things that happened or happen in the traditional financial markets. And so I think sometimes just trying to educate folks on, what they might be familiar with and sort of attaching that to the way that it works within, a blockchain enabled environment is really helpful. There's so many tools now available. There's so many things that can help educate people today on this. And I think that's one of the things that, we sort of see ourselves when we're working with issuers. I think we see ourselves sort of as solution architects. And what I mean by that is it's not as simple as just, taking an order from a customer and executing, but we often find ourselves working with their teams to educate them on the process, providing resources to help them get a better understanding. And so, I think we stretch ourselves beyond the role of traditional broker dealer and transfer agent and really try and extend to a more partnership like relationship so that they can really understand the benefits of what it is that we're providing.
Mhm. So we have some blockchain nerd questions coming up, so I'm just prepping your brain for that. I want to just bring up to the listeners in the audience, when a solutions architect, when that level of service is coming from you, that's typically something that a broker dealer can provide you versus a crowdfunding portal versus a funding portal. There is a slight difference in the level of service each can provide you. So just want to be clear that he's providing these, that Securitize is providing these solution architect solutions wearing their broker dealer hat. So my other question for you from the audience rather is, does your E&O, D&O insurance provider cover blockchain hacks and other mishaps like misdirected transfers?
Well, listen, that's probably a better question for my GC, but I would have to imagine that for sure, operating in the space that we're in, I do know from a broker dealer perspective, because I handle all of the insurance required to operate in these spaces. I'm certain that, we're covered in a more than ample way for any business that we're operating in. But as on the specifics, I'm pretty confident about that. It's a good question though.
And just remember, if you have a DeFi project or DeFi protocol you're trying to raise money for, it's super helpful to have a centralized agent who can get those misdirected funds back for you. I know that might be anathema to the concept of decentralized, but you're going to love having someone in your corner when you need some customer service. Another question from Duccini. Any thoughts on multisig wallets as a way to solve the custody issue?
That one, Samson, I'm going to have to, I'm just not versed enough in that. Yeah.
It's a blockchain nerd question, and Duccini asked a bunch of those. It may or may not solve this. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a special AMA with Duccini where we discuss blockchain and multisig wallets for handling custody issues. Thank you, Duccini, for volunteering for that. So that was our only question. That was our last question. And I just wanted to circle back because I feel like Brian had asked a question about, he had a statement. And I wanted to give a little bit of clarity about what we could do to make it easier for for investors, for issuers to raise capital. He said, what reforms to Reg CF could be helpful for capital raising? So he initially said, he suggested removing and raising the investor cap, which I think is great. the Crowdfunding Professional Association, we're always advocating for updating the definition of accredited investors. However, I'm going to say I don't agree with removing the holding period. I think that particularly it adds a bit of uncertainty if you could buy something and sell it in the next moment. I'm a fan of the holding period because it adds a moment of pause to help the business owner actually run their business and not worry about who's dumping their stock. But Scott, do you have any thoughts about that?
No, I think you're spot on. I think I would say that I'm in full agreement with your assessment there. And yeah, I think that I definitely support what you said.
Yeah, because I'm for liquidity. I'm just not for overnight pumping and dumping, because that might happen if you remove the holding period requirement. Also, for relaxing financial statement rules, I'm not a fan of that, particularly when we are talking about blockchain and other fintech automations. You should have a dashboard that gives you a pretty good snapshot in time. That it might not be real time, but it should be relatively close to that.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think, we err on the side of more information than less information. I think, with the investor in mind. And so I think you're spot on there as well.
Yeah, and don't forget, I paid Scott to agree with me. So I paid. The last thing, though, what I think that could be helpful to issuers is clear, brighter line rules for testing the water, because I think there is some strategic advantage if you can more easily, determine the temperature. Like, is there interest in this deal without having to go through quite as many of the process? So I think that's something that the Crowdfunding Professional Association will continue to work on, and we'll circle back with you on if we've made any strides with testing the water.
Yeah, and I mean, I could say that we've worked on a couple of those projects ourselves, and I agree too. I think it's a great addition to the product suite. It really adds value to the issuer in terms of getting indication around their project in whole. So like, we encourage that. We've sort of structured a sort of mini offering around that, and so we'd also be advocates for that for issuers as well.
Mm-hmm. So we're wrapping up this. We're in the fourth quarter 2-minute warning. We've talked about how Securitize, you work with issuers for either Reg CF, Reg A plus, Reg D, for issuing digital assets, being a transfer agent with ATS listings. What is the other one thing that you want the audience and the listeners to know about Securitize going into 2022? Maybe make it 2 things. Go.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I'd love to point out is a new entity that we recently launched called Securitize Capital. It's a part of our business that we formed that we use to issue institutional grade funds. So we've already issued a couple funds that I'd encourage the group to go out and look at. We have a number of incredibly exciting projects that we'll be announcing shortly. And so I think there'll be a focus for us around Securitize Capital in 2022. And so we're really excited about what's happening there. And I think the second thing would be really the growth of Securitize ID as sort of a standalone product in the marketplace, because we really feel like we can benefit the DeFi community in a meaningful way with the power of this product that we've created. And so I think that would really be the second thing that I'd highlight, like, look out for us out there in the DeFi space, and what Securitize ID can do to sort of assist, as the regulators start to become a little bit more focused on it. You'll see Securitize being really helpful in that area. Those would be the 2 things. Awesome.
David Duccini sent you a link on multisig wallet, so you could do some homework. I'll make sure you get that. But don't worry,
Right.
Duccini and I will do an AMA with him, and you can call and ask him really tough technical questions.
I will do that.
So Keep an eye out for Securitize, their Securitize Capital, how they launch Securitize ID as its own individual product. And just remember, oh, I forgot to ask you, Scott, where can people find more information about Securitize?
Yeah, just go to securitize.io, and they'll have all of the information around all of the entities that we've talked about today and all the products and services. Of course, hit us on social media. We're out there across all of the venues, but really for sort of detailed information about each of the product offerings we talked about today, securitize.io.
Awesome. So that's it for me and Scott today. This is our last AMA of 2021. We will see you all again in the new year. You can hold any of the predictions that we've made against me in the new year, because this year will be history. So that's it for the moment. Scott, thanks for taking out the time to do this AMA. We will see you in the next orbit.
Thank you for having me. It was great.
See you guys later.
Okay. Bye-bye.